Now these cars had been sitting for quite some time. The pictures of them were dusty, the kind of thing that just gets me really, really excited. Now there are supercars and hypercars all around the world, but more than anywhere else, they are here in the United States. And the primary reason for that is that it's one of the cheapest places on earth to own an automobile. Doesn't matter if it's a Honda Civic or a Koenigsegg, the US is a very inexpensive place to own a car. Now, of course, we have a lot of people complaining about the fact that in the last 6 months, gasoline prices have increased by 50% or so. But it still costs less than half to buy a gallon of gasoline here than a gallon of petrol elsewhere in the world. And so even though people are complaining, it is a very, very cheap place to buy a car, to insure a car, to park a car. All the things that surround automobile ownership are cheap in the United States. When we buy a new car, it will have had some tariff levied, but again, it's not all that much. And the registration costs and the sales taxes and things generally don't amount to anywhere near 10% of the car's value. Now, elsewhere in the world, those import duties and tariffs can be more than 100, even 200% of a car's value, which is a lot on a normal passenger car, but on a hypercar level purchase price of millions of dollars, it is a lot. Now, even here in the US, we've talked about the Montana LLCs that people form to get around sales taxes, but you can imagine the lengths to which people are willing to go in other parts of the world to avoid 7-figure tariffs, duties, or registration fees are pretty substantial. Now, one of the things that I've mentioned over and over again that I love about the relationship with the VINwiki audience is that you guys send me all of the interesting cars that pop up for sale, especially if they have a terrible or interesting story to them. And so I love that. I appreciate it. I do apologize that I cannot respond to all of the messages, but I have bought many of the cars and I definitely appreciate it also, even if I don't respond, because it's honestly hundreds of messages, 200 or 300 messages a day, most of the time that you guys are sending me with different ideas, different cars that you found. And so I try to respond when I can, but I apologize. But regardless, know that I did see it. And at least if I'm just scrolling through, I do my best. But about a week ago, my inbox started to be filled up with screenshots from a couple of Instagram accounts that were publicizing 2 different Koenigsegg auctions. And this was fascinating because it was not older Koenigseggs. I'd done a video a few months ago about my pursuit of trying to buy a couple of seized Koenigsegg CCRs that were in Korea. These were in fact an Agera RS and a Regera, or Regera, lots of different pronunciations, but the cars from Ängelholm, Sweden. And as we know, the version of the Agera had bested the Bugatti Veyron Supersport's top speed record. Super duper cool cars, may or may not have been bested by the Tuatara since then, but regardless, awesome. Now these cars had been sitting for quite some time. The pictures of them were dusty, the kind of thing that just gets me really, really excited. And I was contacted by a guy named Mika who owns the Jesko Registry Instagram page, and his friends have the Ghost Squadron page, and there's a bunch of people who are dyed-in-the-wool enthusiast for the Koenigsegg cars. And that's one of the most interesting things to me about the enthusiast relationship with Koenigsegg as an auto manufacturer is that the audience of people who are just so over the moon wild about these cars are doing a wonderful job of curating the history. In the same way that I cared so much about letting the world know exactly what the existing manual LP640s were and how rare they are, these guys have been documenting from day zero. As soon as they see a car being tested, they start to catalog where it's seen, what the specs are, what the unique options are, and it goes into their registries and they do a brilliant job. And so I'm hugely impressed by these guys, and I know that they're doing it so that when they own one day, it'll feel even more special, and I know that it will. But they gave me a lot more insight into what the story of these cars were. Now, each of them had been smuggled into China because in China, the registration cost would have been 100 to 200% on top of the $2+ million MSRP that each of these cars would have had. And the 2 cars were up for sale on the Jinpai platform, which is something that the Chinese government uses to auction off seized goods. And if a car is being smuggled in to avoid taxes, it is within their purview, I understand it, to seize the car. So these had been forfeited by the owners, and it was unclear if they were both owned by the same person, but they were both seized sometime in 2019. Now, throughout the time since then, there had been multiple efforts by the government to sell them either through brokers or through closed bid auctions or things like that. But generally, when these countries or even the US government tries to sell a car in such a circumstance, there's a lot of restrictions. And even in the verbiage that they used for these auctions, it appears that you have to be a Chinese citizen to bid. Now that's up for some interpretation. The way it's phrased is a disclaimer that all citizens, legal persons, and other organizations with the full capacity for civil conduct can participate in the bidding. So presumably, if you're not a Chinese person, you may not be able to bid. Regardless, it's a little bit outside of my pay grade, so I'm not going to be bidding on one of these cars, but it is fascinating to me exactly what the cars are. Both of these cars are listed on this Chinese auction platform, and the starting bid of the Agera RS is about $2.2 million, and the starting bid of the Regera is about $2.5 million. Now, theoretically, the Agera is more rare and should be worth a bit more money than the Regera. The reputation is that they run a little bit better. It doesn't involve some of the cutting-edge technology that Koenigsegg engineered into the Regera cars, which is super cool, but again, you don't see a whole lot of them racking up a ton of miles. The Agera would probably sell in perfect condition in a totally open market in the threes, maybe touching $4 million based on some recent comps. Difficult to say what the Regera is going to bring, but regardless, both super fantastic cars, presumably with delivery miles, because there was no evidence that the cars were widely used. Now, there are several legally imported and registered Koenigsegg's in China. There are 4 Agera Rs. There's one that's considered to be an R+, because it was sort of rebuilt by the factory after a drunk driving accident. And there is a CCR. Now, all these paid the duties and things like that. And so they're allowed to be there, but this was the only RS that was imported, and obviously that was unsuccessful. So that car's up for sale. The Regera is configured almost exactly like the original factory prototype car. In fact, when I saw it, I thought, well, that's strange. I mean, I didn't imagine somebody would have immediately duplicated that spec. And it's not exact. These guys from the Instagram accounts can point out all the intricacies and differences and that it doesn't have all the aero and carbon options. But again, it's just sitting there. And it has been for so long, through several failed sales, some through a German broker, but regardless, the cars are there, they are for sale. They're being sold with a certificate of confiscation of smuggled cars and motorcycles, a uniform invoice of motor vehicle sales, and confirmation of auction transaction, which I presume in most countries would allow you to import it. Now in the US, you'd either need to get a letter of compliance from Koenigsegg, which I believe they'd probably be able to put together. You'd have to federalize the car or apply for show and display. And I don't believe they're technically eligible for show and display based on precedent, meaning I don't think anybody's done it yet. They should be rare enough to qualify for show or display, but regardless, they are for sale. Now, it'll be interesting to watch and see exactly what they bring, but my honest hope is that they sell for great money in a representation of the healthy market for truly rare and special cars that we've continued to see, and that they go somewhere where they actually get driven. It's a shame to see cars like this just sitting around and rotting, and I cannot imagine the reconditioning that will be required to get them mechanically sound again, but it is possible. But the great thing is there are cars like this all over the world, and it's one of my favorite things about the stories we get to share here on VINwiki is for everybody to be able to know just how cool, just how special, and how not terribly rare these really, really unique opportunities are to buy special cars in a depressed or challenged circumstance. Now, who knows if these will represent an amazing value, but the more that the market is limited, the more chance there is for that to happen. When I was trying to bid on those Korean Koenigseggs, which those were CCRs and they were going to be a whole lot cheaper than what these were, they ended up selling in the $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 range, and I think they've resold since then. That might have been within reach for me, but these really aren't. And I don't know that it would be the place that I would put my $2 million, but the amazing thing about the economy and about the market for cars like this is that there are buyers for so many of these rarefied multi-million-dollar hypercars. And so whatever your dream car is, even if you can't afford it, these are the examples that I want you to hold on to as truth that you are going to be able one day to find your dream car, maybe not in your dream condition, but in a condition that hopefully fits your budget. I just wish this one fit mine. We'd like to thank Auto Tempest for now their 4th year of supporting VINwiki and for their ongoing support of Car Trek. Auto Tempest is the most powerful way to shop for your next car. They allow you to shop through all the major listing sites at the same time. You enter in your criteria once and it shows you everything. They even allow you to search nationally amongst Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist, which you can't do on their own sites. Also, if you're looking for things that aren't cars, use their site Search Tempest. In the same way, you can nationally search for collectibles and electronics and anything else that you want to buy. It makes it a whole lot easier, and it's helped me out a whole lot. Check out the recently released Car Trek 8 and thank Auto Tempest for their ongoing support of VINwiki by looking for your next car at the link in the description below.